Welcome. Hello, everybody. Oh, a few more people coming in. Hello. Hi. Hello. So, as I said, my talk is about record and playback in test automation. And I think it's a brilliant thing and a really important feature in test automation. And I'm going to show you why I think it is a great feature. Not many people agree with me. In fact, I've had a few conversations already today. I first gave this talk a couple of weeks ago at TestCon Manchester. And I remember, I was networking, having a few conversations with people, and it's like, oh, you're doing a talk. And I would be like, yeah, it's on record and playback. Ooh, yeah, not so sure about that feature. And I've had a few conversations here already as well, similar pace. But then after the talk, suddenly people are saying, okay, I quite like it actually. You make some good points there. In fact, here are a few tweets that came after my talk. Dominic, he was one of the speakers at Test Bash. He said he'd previously been a vocal opponent of record and playback. Maybe he was being a bit too harsh. Another person, Anu, she said, changed my outlook towards record and playback. Tom, he mentioned he was still a bit wary about it, but then he actually did speak to me afterwards because he was very worried he might have offended me, and he said, actually, I think you got a point. So I'm hoping by the end of this talk that anyone here who does not think it's a good thing, well, I'm hoping to change your mind. I'm hoping to really sell it to you, and just so you can see how much brilliant, important tool it is for automated testing. I'll start with what is record and playback. Now I'm going to ask some people that have hands up here. Does anyone know what this ancient artifact is? Not the question mark, that. Anyone know what it is? Seriously, not everyone put their hands up. Because I'm really shocked because not everyone knows. If there's people who don't know what it is, that means I'm now officially old. Because I didn't think I was old. It is a VHS cassette. The reason I'm showing that is because when I think of record and playback, I immediately think of VHS cassettes. There is a show in the UK called Coronation Street, really big show. I don't know if anyone here has heard of it. And it's on 3 times a week at 7:30. And this was always particularly annoying for my mum because she finished work at 8 o'clock. Now, obviously, in the 90s, we did not have catch-up television or Netflix or anything like that. So we would record it for her, record the episode of Coronation Street onto a VHS cassette. And then she was able to watch it back at her leisure at a later date. But the problem is, it doesn't quite work like that with test automation. Into a test automation, record and playback is more like the actors are reacting the scenes from Coronation Street, only they decided to move the pub to the other end of the street. And the actors don't know where that pub is now. And they go in and they're like, where's the pub? So the real thing is you need to tell people where the pub's been moved to. As I said, there are a lot of issues with record and playback. A lot of people don't like it. And I don't really blame them. I think there are quite a few issues with record and playback. The real thing, so for me, I always think the real benefit of record and playback is that anyone can develop automated tests. Unfortunately, there is a bad thing about record and playback, and that is that anyone can develop automated tests. The problem is those people. Some people may not. They may just hit record and hope for the best. They hit record their test, and then expect it to work the exact same way as it did before, even when we've changed the software. And that's where some of the issues come by. Then it doesn't work anymore, and then you've got to record the entire thing again, and you just got to do that loop over and over and over again. You're doing that unnecessary work. But that's the problem. If you do it right, you can avoid a lot of that unnecessary work. So I will go back to some of the benefits of record and playback. The risk is the real one. It's suitable for skilled and unskilled developers. Sometimes, and this kind of reflects my own story about how I got into test automation development. I'd been testing for about a year, and then I said, would you like to do some test automation? And I was like, yeah, that's exciting. And then it's such a but then I realised actually it's quite a daunting task. I was like suddenly being thrown into the deep end like that. But then, thanks to record and playback, I was able to generate some of that initial code, learn from it, work it out, and then actually really help develop those tests. And that's the thing, you can just look at the code that's generated. And oh, okay. Testing, testing. You can all hear me now? Were there any bits you couldn't hear before? Oh dear. Would you like me to go through anything again? No, just carry on? Okay, excellent. Skilled and unskilled developers. So my own story is, when I started working on test automation, I hadn't done any coding for about a year. I was also expected to do code in C#, and I'd never done C# before. My previous experience was in Java, but I still had that basic knowledge of coding, and so I was able to just go straight in and go and basically learn the C# from the code that was generated. I go, okay, so that's how that works, and then work out and learn from it, and then add my own code in, refactor it, all sorts of things with it, play about with it, and suddenly it seems like a much less daunting task. The great thing about it, it gives you this instant feedback. One really annoying thing about coding is when you can't run the code, so you have no idea what's wrong with it. You have to really look through it, and then maybe half an hour later, you've eventually got a piece that's running, and it's like you're trying to run it again. With record and playback, you've got that instant code that can run, and you just run it, and you know exactly what it's done, or whether it's done what it's supposed to. So you can really learn from it. I also don't believe in excluding anybody from test automation development just because they don't have the coding skills yet. Doesn't mean they can't develop it, they can do it. In particular, you'll be excluding a very large pool of potential candidates from that job, particularly if you live in areas where skilled workers are a bit scarce. You could be hiring some really enthusiastic testers, manual testers, who could then be introduced to test automation. I don't say anything wrong with manual testing. I think it's a great thing as well. I think people should be doing both manual testing and test automation. I don't think we should be. I think there's definitely a valid thing for looking at both areas of software testing. So you can have like a big mixed skill team then, and you can really, the unskilled developers can develop those skills gradually by being introduced to it through record and playback and adding to the existing test as well. So that's what I think you can. It's really great, and it makes test automation a lot more inclusive, which I think is a very important thing. I think we shouldn't. I don't like the idea of excluding anybody just because they don't have a degree or they don't have the skills yet. And the other big benefit is it's a method to speed up the creation of automated tests. So you can hit play and do some actions, and that code is instantly generated. You've got that code instantly, and that is code that will work for now. And then you can just refactor it, just change it in future, just make it maintainable. So then all you have to do is do that maintenance afterwards. You can learn from it. You can really, really, really develop some good tests really quickly from it. And again, you can just, it's a good as an initial code generator though. And I think that's one big thing, an initial code generator. You still need to adapt and refine, refactor the code later on when you change the application. In fact, sometimes you might even have to do it from the beginning because sometimes it's not always perfect. So you need to look at it, learn from it, find out how it's not perfect, and just improve it. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do in this talk. So the first thing, break up the recordings. Don't just hit play and hope for the best. Don't record the entire test in one go like this. Everything in one go. That's it. And then you have one small change. You have to do the whole thing again. Please do not do that. It will make the test completely unmaintainable. You will then have to re-record that test again next time there's even a tiny change. Instead, it's much better to just break up the recordings. So we have a single recording, open login page, type user 1 into login name text box, and so on and so on and so on. Then, if it's still changed, say they decide to remove the login name text box for some weird reason, you just have to get rid of that recording. Or if they change the way that you open the login page, all you have to do is re-record that one recording, or just change the code. So by breaking it down, you're making it a lot more reusable, maintainable. The other big one, locating items on the page. So there's usually some sort of path it's using to identify different items on the page. There'll usually be like the actual text box, maybe, for login name, the labels, buttons. Make sure that the code used to locate that item actually finds that item each time. One big thing I've had in the past is if you're saving something, suddenly the title bar changes. The title bar changes with the name of the file you've just saved. And then suddenly the code is now code which is using the title bar to find the page won't work because the title bar is different. So you need to make sure it's going to find the same thing each time. And also only that item as well. There's no duplicates in there. Because if that item is missing, is it going to confuse it with another one on the page? Because then suddenly your test is completely invalidated. So you need to look at that as well. So I mentioned being able to, by breaking up the code, you can reuse the recorded code. Here we have a test, testing correct login. So we've got our test there. Open login page, type in the username, type in the password, click OK, and then verify that the welcome page is visible. Now, there are 5 different recordings there. Those can be reused in other tests. There are other tests you're not going to just run that one test. You're going to run incorrect login. And in this test, you've reused 3 of the recordings from the previous test. You've only had to record 2 new items there. Incorrect password and verifying that the incorrect password message has appeared. Again, blank password, very similar again. This time we've only got another recording, typing in a blank password. And then we've got clicking the cancel button instead of the OK button. So a lot of, if you're looking for test automation frameworks that allow record and playback, look for a tool that allows you to reuse the recordings. I don't want to try and sell any tools in this talk, but the one I've used most is Ranorex. And Ranorex is a great tool. It just allows you to reuse the recordings, makes it so easy to do. And if you are introducing new developers into the team, they can then look at those recordings, they can understand what they do, and then they can sort of rearrange the tests accordingly, how they need to. So another great way of just introducing them to test automation. Now there's the other thing, like sometimes this recorded code won't be good. It won't be good. You may need to adapt it. You also want to try maybe allow it to maybe make it reusable in other ways. So one of the steps from the previous set of tests, I'll go back to it a second. We've got the login name. Notice the login name has been used. Well, the same login name has been used the same time each time, but the password, we have entered the same each of those recordings for entering the password. We've got 3 different recordings there for entering a password. And they're very similar. The code will be almost identical with one small thing, and that is the password that's being entered. So we could just reuse that rather than just recording each time for every single password you want to enter, and the same with username as well. So those 3 recordings, entering password 1, entering in incorrect, very imaginative incorrect password there, or a blank password. Instead of doing that, we can just use the same recording each time. So this is the code that was generated in Ranorex. I'm going to go over here so I can just see it a bit better and explain it to you better. First line, reports log, that is reporting, saying in the test report that the mouse is going to click on the on the password text box in the login window. Then it actually does a line of code that is actually going to enter that code. And then there's a delay for some reason. Not really needed. I'll go into that a bit later on. Then it's going to report that you are typing into the keyboard password 1, then it actually does it keyboard press password 1. And as I said, the other ones are going to be almost identical to that. So we want to try and reuse that again. So instead, we're going to take that code. I'm creating a new method. I've pretty much copied and pasted it in, but then took a few things out. So the method, it now takes in a string password. And so you can then run that method each time with a different password. And all I've done is taken that code, taken out the, where's my laser on there? There it is, sorry. I've now changed it so that it's now using that password there. It's reporting, let's click entering that password, and then it's pressing that password. So we've now taken those 3 recordings down into 1. And if anything changes the password the password text box, you only have to change that 1 recording, and that change will be applied to all tests that use that recording. So here's the test that we had before, and we've now changed it. I've created a similar one for username. It's now, we've now only got four recordings from that set of tests that have not been used that were not used in the original test case. The past username can be entered, has been used each time. Each time a different username is entered, and the same with password. Each time a different password is entered. So suddenly we create lots of tests using those same different pieces of data. So now we've managed to create that recording. That those allow certain recordings, different variables to be used in each recording. We can now make use of data-driven features. That's another feature that's commonly available in test automation. It's a great one. It allows you to run lots and lots of tests, but with different sets of data, different variables. So I've taken the correct login. We've used the username recording and the password recording. And then we're just testing different account types. So we've got a data table with username and password for different account types: administrator, standard, premium, executive. And then so now we're able to we've now got 4 new tests from that one test case using the same recordings. We've used it. We've had the new one in there, confirm account type. And obviously the account type, we've got a new data table for that as well. So obviously things go wrong in test automation a lot, unfortunately. This is a quote by Bas Dijkstra from one of his articles, Stop Automating Your Regression Tests for Now. Automation, on the other hand, simply says F you and exits with a failure or exception, leaving you with no feedback at all about the behavior to be verified in steps 11 through 50. So I really love this quote because I think it demonstrates the biggest issue with test automation, and that is robustness. The slightest change can just make all the tests break down. So you need to be able to handle failure in a more graceful way. Instead of saying F you need to maybe say, ooh, that's a bit wrong there, and just warn the user and then be able to then recover from that failure and then carry on with the next test. Because the amount of times I've ran tests, I've got like a big suite of like about 200 tests I want to run overnight. Test 10 fails, and suddenly that it can't recover from that failure in such a way that I want to know what happens in the other tests, the other 400, what other remaining tests. So you need to be able to recover from that failure in such a way so that you can still get that information from the other tests. And I find that exception handling is a great way of doing that. Here's the code from earlier, the methods for creating password, setting password. If it doesn't find, so I've changed it so if it doesn't find the password text box. So it will try, it will report, we're going to click on the password text box, it will then try and click on it. If it can't find it, we then have some code that will run to try and just recover from that. It might be just end the test, you might want to just close down the window and then the software so that you can then start the next test. You may want to just put like a nice friendly warning saying, we couldn't find this, so don't be surprised if something bad happens next time. So just it has more of a graceful failure rather than a fuck you. Sorry, I wasn't meant to say yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to swear in this one. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Can you bleep that out in the recording? My mum's going to watch this probably. So I mentioned reporting. It's great to add some extra reporting when you're adding in your exception handling. Also, just generally, sometimes I've noticed that the reporting that comes from the recordings doesn't always make sense to a human, or at least not a human who does not understand code. Now, people may be reading these test reports, not necessarily you or the developer, but also some other business stakeholders who want to know what's happened. They want to see that report. You want to make those things human readable, and that's probably that's quite important as well, because there's no point in having a test report if no one understands what it's saying. So you then want to just look at the code saying, can a human other than me understand that? I always think some of me language completely different from other people's language, and not because I don't speak French, so you know. So just really have a look at the reporting, what code is being used for reporting. Does it make sense? Can it be understandable by anybody, not just you? Think about who's going to read it as well. And also, I love adding screenshots. One of my colleagues really hates it when I add too many screenshots because it really, really builds up the size of the file, of the report. But I always say, like, a picture tells 1,000 words. You can get a lot of information from that screenshot. You know exactly what is going on in that screenshot. So if you are a bit uncertain, if you want a lot more information from that page, add a screenshot. Now, I mentioned sleeps and delays earlier. That recording, it added delay, and it was in milliseconds, 200 milliseconds. That's a 20th. That's 1/5 of a second. It was completely unnecessary. There was no need for that. Normally, the steps have an extra timeout in it anyway, so it will have like maybe a 30-second timeout to try and find the item, and then when it gets to it, it will then say, "Okay, we found it in 2 seconds." After we're not going to do the whole 30 seconds timeout. Also, sleeps and delays can be really unnecessary. So it adds in these delays, sometimes for a ridiculously small amount of time, which is unnecessary. Sometimes a really long time because that's necessary for take the page to load. And obviously, sometimes people want to do that. People might want to add extra sleeps in just to make it a bit long, just to make it a bit more robust. Particularly if you're testing on multiple environments, and some environments are slower than others. So you have one environment that takes 23 seconds, sorry, that takes 2 seconds to load, 8 seconds to load, 20 seconds to load. So you may set it to 25 seconds, just a bit of a buffer, so it should work every time. But of course, that's time wasted each time, and 23 seconds may not sound much, but it really adds up for each test. Say you've got like 10 steps in each test, 23 steps, that's 230 seconds. You're going into minutes there, and then you might be sending like 20, 30 tests in a row. You're going into like 10, 20 minutes, but you could really be cutting down the time it takes to run the tests. So a lot of the time, most features include wait for condition instead. So you might replace it with something with the wait instead. Similar to timeouts that the page objects will use. Instead of sleeping for 25 seconds, you will wait for 25 seconds. But if the page loads before then, you can then stop. It will then stop. So yeah, instead it's saying wait for login page to exist. So yeah, if it does take a little bit long for the login page to open, that's okay. It'll wait. If maybe after a certain timeout period, so maybe usually about 30 seconds, if it does quite often take a while to load, you might want to set it to a minute. Just wait, maybe give a wait, just wait, and then after, say, 5 seconds, if it's loaded after 5 seconds, it will then continue with the test. If it's there after 10 seconds, it will continue with the test. So that's another good thing, just replace any sleeps with waits, because normally record and playbacks don't add waits in normally. So I find that's usually a good thing to use. So, just to summarise, record and playback, it's not perfect. It's far from perfect, must not be relied upon. But with a little bit of refactoring, I think you can really make it a great thing. You really can make some great stuff there. You can create some high quality, maintainable, robust automated tests that can really be used long term, that can be really continue to be used. It's a great way of introducing new people to test automation. You then have more developers working on it, which can make it even a greater thing. And just designing the tests to be reusable. Make sure every bit of the test is reusable. Making sure that removing anything unnecessary, like any unnecessary reporting, anything confusing reporting, putting something a bit more sensible in. Just adapting it to suit your needs, what you need in that report, that information you need in the report, that you may not be able to get from just recording alone. I would always say, like, it's great of introducing people. Just don't rely on it completely. In fact, I've started to not like the term record and playback. I think it is a really bad way of describing it, because I think it implies that it's instantly perfect, and it's not. And I think most people agree it is not perfect. So instead, I think we should be calling it record and refactor instead. Record, then refactor, then playback. And when you have that refactoring in, you can really, really create some great things with record and playback, which is why I think that record and playback is an absolute joy, a brilliant thing, and I think everyone should be embracing it. So thank you very much for listening. I hope I've managed to convert anybody who previously did not like it. So final slide with shameless promotion, big giant picture of me. I put that picture on there. I am a bit vain. I like that T-shirt as well. Also, it's my LinkedIn profile picture. So if you look for me on LinkedIn, you can find that's me. For a bit more further reading, I do recommend What's That Smell? Tidying Up Our Test Code by Angie Jones. Angie Jones is a brilliant speaker, amazing, very engaging. If you ever get to see her speak, I do recommend, if you get an opportunity to see her speak, I do recommend it. You'll find it's just a talk on refactoring test code. So in this talk, I've talked about refactoring small parts of the test code, the recordings itself, and adapting them, maintaining them. In this talk, she talks about refactoring the code as a whole, and I think it's quite a useful one to watch. You'll find it if you search Angie Jones, What's That Smell? On YouTube. If you have any questions, I have a blog. It's called Louise Gibbs Test. As you can see, I'm very imaginative with my names. .wordpress.com. I have put the slides now on my blog. If you go to past events, because I've now given the talk, you'll find the links for both yesterday's talk and today's talk. So you can download them if you need to. I also use Twitter quite extensively. My Twitter handle is @Louise_J_Gibbs. Another imaginative name. At least you know it's me. So if you want to tweet on there or anything, or ask me questions on there, or put any comments about this on either LinkedIn or Twitter, or even on my blog, please feel free to. I love hearing comments. I love hearing questions. So please ask lots of questions. And that's about it. And yeah.